Hello and welcome to Access Asia. Coming up, India mourns the death of Queen Elizabeth II. After 70 years on the throne, we look at the mixed relationship between the late monarch and the former British colony. A new documentary looks at the challenges of independent news reporting in India, death threats, signal cuts, and financial pressures. Analysis in a moment. And a rebirth in Australia. After wildfires ravaged Kangaroo Island, life is rising from the ashes. Well, world leaders paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth II. India's Prime Minister called her a stalwart of our times. When she was born in 1926, India was still a British colony. When she took the throne, India had been independent a mere 5 years. 7 decades later, it's become an economic powerhouse and a major player on the global stage. Alison Sargent has more.
She was the first British monarch to visit an independent India. In 1961, Elizabeth II and her husband Philip were the president's guests of honor at the Republic Day parade. They toured the Taj Mahal, paid tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, and even enjoyed an elephant ride, with huge crowds greeting them every step of the way. By her third and final visit in 1997, for the 50th anniversary of India's independence, the reception had cooled. On that trip, for the first time, the Queen addressed what she called difficult episodes in India's colonial history, citing the 1919 massacre in Amritsar, when British troops opened fire on an unarmed crowd, killing hundreds. But the monarch stopped short of an apology. Over 2 decades after that last visit, news of Queen Elizabeth's death was largely greeted with indifference on the streets of the Indian capital.
I have very neutral feelings for the Queen. It's neither bad nor good. Because we were once ruled by the British, and because of her family, we had to tolerate slavery for many years. And many big massacres have happened in India because of their family.
We don't care about the royalty any longer because, ruling in our own country our way is better than comparing with king and queen.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has sought to purge the country of colonial symbols. Still, he was quick with his official response, offering condolences and praising Elizabeth II's dignity and decency. As India observed one day of national mourning, some did express sadness for the Queen's passing and thoughts for her successor.
We are painting the picture of King Charles to congratulate him that he became the King of England, and we are very happy.
So far, there's been no major push for India to leave the Commonwealth, but the Queen's death has revived questions about the fate of the Kohinoor diamond. Mined in India, it now sits in the crown once worn by the Queen's mother, and has been trending on Indian social media, with many calling for its return.
There's concern in India over one of the country's few independent TV news channels after a hostile takeover bid by billionaire businessman Gautam Adani. In a country where most news channels function as government mouthpieces, NDTV is one of India's most trusted sources of information. Here to tell us more is Leela Jacinto, a reporter and senior editor from our internet team. Leela, always a pleasure to see you. There's a new documentary out that follows veteran journalist Ravish Kumar, and you wrote a piece for our website about the film.
Yes, it's a 92-minute documentary, and it follows Ravish Kumar, a leading Indian TV newsman, over a 2-year period, from 2018 to early 2020. And it really shows you the pressures that that this particular journalist is going under, because he works for NDTV, as you say, a very acclaimed news media organization. It was one of the pioneers of TV journalism in India, and it has managed to maintain its editorial standards. And that's no mean feat in this age of misinformation and divisiveness, because the broadcast media in India, a lot of the channels are really government mouthpieces. And there is a lot of targeting of journalists who are just trying to do their job, which is hold truth to power. And they can often be targeted as first and foremost, they're targeted as liberal media. They can be labeled anti-national and even traitors. And, this sort of labeling emboldens the right-wing Hindu nationalist supporters of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who can, violently attack people who have been labeled as anti-nationals. Now, for a journalist like Kumar, this translates into death threats. So it's media that is really, this is a news organization that is really functioning in a very, very difficult climate that is actually being asphyxiated by political pressure.
Yeah, and Kumar, a very well-respected journalist, a well-known journalist.
Yes, he's a news warrior. He just battles on, taking on a very, very difficult climate, and you can see in the film how this pressure works. There are technical problems. The broadcast signal can suddenly cut in the middle of an expose of the lynching of a Muslim man. Then the channel can go behind a subscription wall in impoverished areas that are vote-rich, of course. Then, this translates into financial pressures. Advertisers, financiers start backing off. When this happens, you have staff cuts, so you don't have the staff to really function properly. And then you have, the state pressure. And the state pressure mirrors what has been happening in Russia and Turkey, which is there's a lot of legal harassment. The government can send the tax police to conduct these endless investigations. They deny that it's politically motivated, but the message is very clear.
And what would a likely takeover mean?
That's very mixed. Gautam Adani is Asia's biggest, richest man. So there are certain problems of big business owning news organizations. It's really for the love of journalism, as a media critic told me. One of the big problems is Adani is considered very close to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He denies that the relationship is improper in any way. But the thing is, when this happens in India, when you have these big holdings that own a news organization, the government can target the other business interests. Licenses can be revoked. The group does not get government contracts, for instance, until these pesky journalists are brought in line. And all this is happening, in the lead up to the 2024 Indian general elections. So the stakes are really high for this.
All right, Leela, thank you very much. Leela Jacinto from our internet team. A recent deluge of monsoon rains in Pakistan piled on top of more than 2 months of record flooding. Well over 1,000 people were killed, millions made homeless. Officials call it a climate disaster. Damage will likely be far greater than the initial estimates of around $10 billion. And to make matters worse, the flooding has crippled the agricultural sector, raising the prospect of a food crisis. Officials say the flooding could set the country back years or even decades.
They call themselves frontline warriors, a group of men working around the clock to reinforce this hastily built barricade of mud and sandbags, the only barrier protecting Mehar city from the waters rising around it.
25 kilometers, Dadu 60 kilometers.
The water has wiped out the surrounding farmland and hundreds of villages where people remain stranded.
We heard that bodies are lying on the rooftops and there's no rescue effort. Army officials come and try to rescue people, but private boat operators charge heavy fees. Those who drowned in the flood are poor people who have no money. The other option for them is to save their children by wading through snake-infested waters.
Many of those who evacuate are now living in tent camps like this one. This woman, Aisha, made it out just in time to give birth to her baby at a nearby hospital.
Sometimes we don't have food for 2 days. I'm not producing milk to breastfeed my child. I'm sick, and my child is also sick.
On a 2-day visit to the area, the UN Secretary General called it climate carnage unlike any he's ever seen, with a flooded area 3 times the size of his home country, Portugal.
Climate change caused by human activity is supercharging storms and catastrophes in Pakistan, but also in Chad, the Horn of Africa with their terrible drought and the risk of famine and beyond. All these countries did not cause the problem, that they are paying the price.
Antonio Guterres called for massive and urgent financial aid, saying it's not only a question of generosity, but of justice. According to the UN, a third of Pakistan is underwater, over 1,300 people have died, and tens of millions are now homeless.
Australia's Kangaroo Island, scorched by wildfires, has risen from the ashes. Typically, vegetation soon grows back thanks to the nutrients from dead trees returning to the soil. But because of climate change and bigger, hotter, and more frequent fires, some forests aren't so fortunate. And that's making what's happening on Kangaroo Island all the more important.
On Australia's Kangaroo Island, these forests have fought back after experiencing one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. Life has miraculously returned to what was once burnt land. In December 2019, megafires ravaged Australia for 240 consecutive days. It was an ecological disaster so big, the army were called in.
There's so much active fire edge that it's going to take not just days, weeks, but weeks and weeks potentially for good quality containment.
12 million hectares went up in smoke. That's an area of land larger than the Netherlands, Denmark and Switzerland combined. More than 3 billion animals were killed or displaced. 200 million tons of carbon dioxide were emitted into the atmosphere. Scientists feared the worst, but Australia's nature is doing its thing.
In terms of carbon balance, in terms of the impact on global warming, the fires in Australia were CO2 neutral, meaning that the carbon that was emitted has been absorbed by nature, which has grown back strong.
This cycle of fire, rain and recovery has played out in Australia for tens of millions of years. But scientists have long warned that a warming climate could mean more severe fires more often.
Oh, we've all seen a few zombies before on our morning commutes, but nothing like this in Jakarta. Check it out. The city turned this train station into the set of a zombie apocalypse. The goal was to promote young people using mass transit. It does not encourage eating brains, though. That's it for this week of Access Asia. We'll leave you with these images. Thank you for watching.